conflict is inevitable in any human community. Unresolved conflict may happen everywhere, even in church and family, in a silent corner, or behind the door, or in church parking lot. When we have such a conflict, how can we reconcile with one another and restore a loving relationship with God and with one another? That's what we are going to share through the text today. In verse 15, we can see the context of the story and today. And then Jesus says, if your brother or sister sin against you. Well, this is from the Common English Bible. But NIV also says, if your brothers and sisters, like a Common English Bible. But NRSV is saying, if another member of the church sin against you. So they are using different language, but we understand that Jesus is talking to his followers. And he's talking about the sin against the people, not sin against God. So it's talking about the wrongdoings Christians may do and how to manage a conflict coming from that. But here's another interpretation that may bring totally different result. At the end of the verse 15 is saying, if they listen to you, then you have won over your brother or sister, in both Common English Bible and NIV. So if we take it literally, it sounds like the purpose of the confrontation is to win over another person, which you often try to do, proving I am right and you are wrong. And just blaming others and humiliating them and exclude them in our social network or separate them. But NRSV says, if the members listen to you, then you've gained that person. And Message Bible says, you have made a friend. So they may give a totally different application. How are we doing? Through the conflict, are we discerning God's will and try to restore the loving relationship with others? Or creating my version of the story and keep telling others until I win? Friends, the purpose of the resolution should be bringing back that person in our loving relationship. Not to humiliate or exclude someone or separate them, and even toward the division of the church. However, personal confrontation is often the last stage rather than the first in Christian and complaints. So what does Jesus talk about this? The way Jesus approach on this matter is different than the way the world does in judicial system. According to the text today, Jesus instructed with a couple steps. First, in private conversation. Private conversation. Not to open through the social media or email or text or like that, but it's a private conversation. Most of the conflict can be resolved in the first step. Yet, it is so common that people skip this. It means when we have an issue of a confrontation, we do not go to our friend, we do not go to the church members, we do not go to our family members in the first, because we want to validate our thought and feelings and emotions. So we don't go to that person directly, but try to find someone who can validate my emotion and my feelings. It doesn't resolve the issue, but create the uncomfortable feelings or erosion of the unresolved antagonism. So when someone comes to you with a problem with another person, here's what you need to say. Okay, have you talked about this with that person? Have you talked about this with that person? So help that person to go directly with that person. If you need, I can go with you. If you're not comfortable to go to that person directly. That's just something we can and suggest. That's where Jesus does say to begin. And a second step, take a witness. The purpose of bringing witness is not sharing a stone to throw, but for the reconciliation to regain that person, to have a friend again, and restoring that loving relation with that person. If that doesn't work, then take the case to the church. Then what's the purpose of bringing the case to the church? What if they don't listen even in that situation? So in the middle of verse 17, I read, if they won't pay attention even to the church, treat them as you would a Gentile and tax collectors. This is why and how many Christians use and abuse this the verse to excommunicate someone from their faith community, or find an excuse or reason to separate them, or either they leave or I do. Is that what Jesus is really talking about? How are we interpreting this? Treat them as a Gentile and tax collectors. In Jewish culture and context, the Gentile were people who were far from God. And tax collectors were the people who were working for the Roman Empire. So they ignored the tax collectors as sinners and hated them as they hated Romans. But Jesus was willing to be a friend with the tax collectors and Gentile. So, what do I learn? What do we learn from here? When church decide I am right, but the other person didn't listen, then what am I supposed to do? Keep ignoring that person and humiliating that person and trying to exclude them or leave the church or go to another church or treat them like a Jesus, how Jesus treated them. Well, Jesus was very sensitive, the need of the social holiness. That's why he's teaching about this to his followers, because he cares for his church and his people. But he never ignored any individual because of what they did. He's willing to be a friend, even with those sinners and tax collectors. When he did, there was a true transformation happened. There was a tax collector, and his name is Zacchaeus. Well, people hated him because he was working for the Roman Empire. And people were picking on him and thinking all those the money and wealth came out of their pockets. But Jesus didn't mind to visit his house to have a dinner with Zacchaeus. That made a really big change. That's amazing love. So Zacchaeus says to the Lord, Lord, I will give a half of my possession. That doesn't mean he's wealthy enough to live with another half. He says, if I have overcharged the people on their tax, which I believe he did, I will give them 4 times as much. Wow. So what made him to proclaim like this? Jesus' love. That Jesus' love transformed him. That's what make a big difference. So friends, so how are we following Jesus? The way I want to follow? Or the way we want to follow? Or the way Jesus taught and did? The way Jesus did is challenging us because we didn't really practice that way. But here's the good news. That when we treat others like how Jesus treated Gentiles and tax collectors, even though there are challenges and risks, we may encounter Jesus because Jesus is with them and for them. Friends, Jesus promised to be with us always. Where do you sense that presence in your life? Past couple years, I really enjoyed container gardening, producing healthy vegetables and tomatoes. Well, as I moved in a current parsonage, I decided to go from a container gardening to raised bed gardening, which I think that's an upgraded version. Well, however, I had to experience a failure, a total failure. Many says that their tomatoes grew like a weed, but not mine. I planted 4 different kinds of the peppers, but none of them produced anything in here. And all of them is changed like a brown. But you know what? Last weekend, that memorable weekend, after I came back from the campground, I found 1 red tomato in the middle of the brown in the bushes. Wow. That's my first expression was, wow. I thought it was all dead. It's all brownish. I give up. But there was a really in the bright colors of a tomato. Even though it was small, it was there. I felt God's grace. God's grace is always there, like that, no matter I recognize it or not. But here's a question. Are we recognizing God's grace not only in times of a peaceful time, but also while walking in brokenness, while walking in a failure, even in conflicts with others? Can we recognize that grace? I just want to remind all of us, including myself, for the basics of the church. Some may say the most important thing in church is worship. So that person says, that's why we are here, to worship and praise the Lord. So that should be our priority. Some says the most important thing in church is fellowship, loving relationship. So that should be our priority, loving relationship. Well, some said the most important thing in church is the mission and outreach. That's what Jesus commanded us. So that should be our priority. But you know what? We all need that. All those things are necessary to be a healthy church. Some church might have a stronger area than others. It's the same thing in our ministry part of the church and administrative part of the church. Some people think is a ministry part is the most important part. Some says a business part. Let me tell you clearly, all those administrative part of the church, that business part is existing for the ministry of the church. But at the same time, for all those people who are working for those ministry, has to respect for those people who are working hard for the administrative part. What we need is a respect each other to bringing God's love and grace to the community, in here now and beyond our community. Open heart and open mind, open doors. No matter how many times we say the only thing matter is I will living on that. I want to follow Jesus. Yes, I love Jesus. I want to follow him. No matter how many times we say that, the only thing matter is are we walking in love like Jesus? That matters. Friends, as a children of God, we want to live peacefully with everyone, especially in Christian brothers and sisters and our church family. However, we might be in conflict from time to time, and confrontation is not favorable for many of us. But God knows it is not easy. So here's what God says in verse 19. It says, "Again, I assure you that if two of you agree on earth about anything you ask, then my Father who is in heaven will do it for you." In here, about anything you ask, this is not a blank check for everything. In Greek, the word in here, it is a pragma, which means a legal terminology of a matter. So good news is, God knows how difficult it is to agree in dispute in a Christian community. But here's a real great news is in verse 20, it says, "For where two or three are gathered in my name," Jesus promised, "I am there with them." That's a great news. Even in that brokenness, even in that failure and a conflict, I am there with them. For where two or three are gathered in my name. That's what Jesus has promised in here. So, friends, is anyone here who has a disturbed heart in relationship? Shall we take that as an opportunity to experience God's love and grace as we include that person in the circle of love? May the Lord bless your heart as you reflect this word in your life. So here's a video clip that we can reflect what it means to let go.
I've carried this burden for too long. I have turned from you, and my heart has turned to stone. You say your yoke is easy, yet I carry it still. You say your burden is light, yet I carry it still. You say you will give me rest, yet I carry it still. Lower my vengeance, my anger, and my hatred, and banish my wicked thoughts from me. Send down a drop from heaven of your Holy Spirit to soften this heart of rock of mine. Give me the strength to let go. Let my memory provide no shelter for grievance against another. Let my heart provide no harbor for hatred of another. Let my tongue be no accomplice in the judgment of a brother. Give me the strength to surrender. Give me the strength to be weak, to let go, and not pick it up again.